Sure. Well, good to be with you. Yeah, I just climbed off the Poland to Kyiv train. It went overnight, and I spoke to some passengers there, and very much a somber mood. People are getting together with friends and family today, reminiscing about what happened. But, they also told me in characteristic Ukrainian way, we're going to try and use humor today to get us through this, because without humor, we would not have endured this long. I've noticed today also a lot less traffic on the streets, that sort of thing. But here we are past 1 o'clock heading into 2 p.m. local time, and it's very, very quiet nationwide. So I think that's a good sign. Having said that, having lived on and off in Ukraine since before the start of the war, there's a kind of reverse logic here among many of us that when things get a little bit too quiet, we worry, because that could signal a Russian barrage of rockets up the road.
Yes, and in the past 12 months, as you've explained, you've been in and out of Ukraine. Now, beyond the obvious destruction and displacement of people, what's changed there from what you've observed?
Yeah, well, quite a bit. I mean, for one thing, and I noticed this again on the train today, is I think a lot of the asylum seekers who have gone to neighboring countries such as Moldova and Poland are actually coming back, because not only have things become very expensive there, they've also, people long for their homes and their families, and they want to come back here, even though there are anxieties and risks. The other thing, of course, is the Ukrainian military is getting far better kitted out now than before, including provisions from Australia, lethal weaponry from Australia. That's all very, very good. But what they need is everything they've asked for, and that includes, for example, the attack helicopters, the fighter jets. They need also a more robust ability to close their skies to Russian missiles. And also they need longer range on those missiles to be able to strike legitimate military targets within Russia. One of the main kind of objectives they need to obtain, I think, in the next weeks is to reclaim that land bridge that connects mainland Russia to Crimea. So that will cut off a major supply route as well.
Yeah, we'll get to the military aid a little bit later, but as you mentioned, refugees are coming back. How are people there feeling about the prospect of there being no end in sight at this moment?
Well, of course, it's very frustrating. And, there's kind of obscured reality that you see living here. And what I mean by that is, for example, small and medium-sized businesses are really struggling. A lot of them are having to buy expensive generators. Your reporter mentioned what's going on here with the power system. And, there's less people going out and buying goods and services. The agricultural sector, of which represents a huge part of the Ukrainian economy, is in a shambles. Right now, as farmers should be preparing to prepare for the spring planting season, many of them are fearful to go into their fields because of the huge number of landmines. And if they don't even have landmines, then they have to worry about whether they even have the equipment to farm with, because a lot has been destroyed, whether there's contamination on their lands, and whether they have the necessary funds to be able to buy seeds and that sort of thing. So for those returning, they are facing quite a bit of challenges, but one cannot overstate the irrepressible resilience one sees among Ukrainian people here, whether it's in Lviv or here in Kyiv or down in Odessa where I'm based. It's really amazing.
Yeah, let's get into the micro economics of all of this. How are people how are they able to purchase these goods and services that are lacking at the moment? Where are they getting the money from if there is no work to be conducted? Is there financial aid, for instance, that's coming in for day-to-day life?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, look, the Ukrainian government has a monthly budget deficit of $5 billion US. That's a lot. So it really limits its ability to give handouts, for example, to small and medium-sized businesses. They've even had to make very difficult but painful cuts, for example, to diplomatic posts overseas. I think what's happening too is that there's quite a bit of foreign money coming in from those Ukrainians who have gone overseas to work. I've been traveling a fair bit in the past while visiting Ukrainian communities in Europe and North America. And the one thing you really notice is they're not just sitting at home taking handouts. They're getting employed as soon as possible. So talking to many of them, I know that a lot of them are sending money back to families here and also hoping to get, for example, their homes reconstructed. There's a lot of non-governmental organizations here on the ground that are helping families either reconstruct their homes or creating temporary housing so that they can live in a proper place while the violence is still going on.
Let's get back to the politics of all of this. We have seen the ramping up of military aid to Ukraine in recent months with tanks and artillery, among other things, and Australian bushmasters as well. Do you see more of this aid coming through in the coming months, and how big a game changer has this been to date?
Yeah, well, of course, the provision of main battle tanks is a very, very important landmark for Ukraine. I believe we're well over the 100 mark. Ukraine is asking for 300 to 400. But a lot of that should have come a lot earlier. And my fear, and that of others, is that Mr. Putin, knowing what we do of him, tends to exploit these gaps in time, for example, between when those pledges of tanks were made and between the time they'll actually be delivered. So that's a big problem here. But I think what everyone has to realize is that Mr. Putin is continuing to rattle that nuclear saber, so to speak, withdrawing from the New START treaty. He's not taken the use of tactical nuclear weapons off the table, and we have to remind ourselves that the Russians still hold the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and I'm fearful there of two things: either they'll make a mistake, like they did in Chernobyl in '86, and that could cause a real big nuclear contamination, or they'll deliberately make a strike as they're retreating. So a lot of moving parts here, but again, we have to remain optimistic given the resilience of the people here.
Of course, we do see relations between Moscow and the West continuing to deteriorate, and we saw that with Russia pulling out of that nuclear treaty with the US. Where do you see the war heading to, I suppose, in the medium term throughout this year of 2023?
Yeah, well, a lot of this depends on the role of China. They say that they're hoping for they proposed a peace plan. They say that they're being neutral, that they're not going to provide lethal weaponry, but I'm not so sure about that. If they don't obviously provide lethal aid, I think they'll be doing that through allies like North Korea, perhaps others, rogue states who can bring it over to Russia. So that could be a big game changer. And the other key actor here is Turkey. Mr. Erdogan is very preoccupied right now, obviously, not only with the tragic earthquake, but upcoming elections. But he is one of the few trusted leaders that can pick up the phone, call Mr. Zelensky or call Mr. Putin, and both of them will pick up the receiver. So he, for example, played a big role in brokering that Black Sea grain initiative. And I think if some kind of meeting of the minds, if you will, between the two sides will happen, it will be because Mr. Erdogan participated in that brokering of that meeting. And
just a final question, Michael. Let's talk about NATO and Ukraine's push for NATO membership. Do you see that as being in the too hard basket at the moment, assuming that there would be a very strong response from Vladimir Putin? I think we've reached the point where NATO leaders have finally grown the spine to put Ukraine on that fast track to membership. And I think they're also well on their way to becoming an EU member along with Moldova. The question remains is how Article 5 will be exercised, that provision where an attack on one is regarded as an attack on all. And, we've already seen stray Russian missiles transit through Moldovan airspace. Missile fragments have landed in Poland. They've reportedly even transited through Romanian airspace, which is also a NATO member. So
if that continues to happen, would that trigger our Article 5? So it remains to be seen how serious they are, but we can't overstate this enough, that the signals from the West have to be crystal clear. Otherwise, those red lines that we all think are going to be there will be crossed, and Mr. Putin will go even further.
Okay, Michael, really good to get your thoughts in Kyiv. Thanks very much, and stay safe.
My pleasure. Thank you.